there is really no amount of money that you could ask for that someone somewhere would consider unreasonable. So what you have to do is you have to consistently level up. You have to upskill so that you're in a position where your skills actually exceed what the market perceives your value to be.
Welcome back to the After Hours Entrepreneur, your guide to your first six-figure year. I'm Mark Savant, your host, and today we are joined by none other than Chris Do. Chris is the CEO and founder of Blind, a design business with a combined billings of over $80 million. Chris is also the founder of The Future, an online education platform with the mission of teaching 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. His channel, The Future, on YouTube has over 2 million subscribers. And there's a reason for that. He's really freaking good at what he does. And personally, I've had the opportunity to leave my day job of over 10 years. And I wake up every morning excited and energized. And I give a lot of credit to Chris for the teachings and education that he puts on his platform. And I'm really honored to bring him to you today. We're covering some integral topics today. Everything from the books that you need to be reading, how to go from small accounts to large payouts. We're talking about when to niche down and when to stay broad. We're talking about the future of education. We're talking about Pokemon. We're talking about what type of animal Chris would be. This episode is bananas, probably my favorite yet after nearly 250, 260 plus episodes. Stick around. You are going to learn something and make it happen for your business. I'm going to give you the lesson. It's up to you to take the action. In the meantime, that's enough of me. Let's get over to Chris. Chris, what is up?
Not much. I'm excited to talk to you today, Mark.
Yeah, me too. I've been admiring you from afar, loving all the content that you're putting out. But I've got to say, and as soon as we hopped on the call here, Chris, I couldn't help but admire your glorious bookcase that you got there.
There they are.
It is fantastic. And I got to say, what is your top book? What is the one book that just really stands out as making a difference in your life and your journey?
That's a really tough question because they're like children. You love them all. But I'll answer the question this way. The book that I often quote the most is The Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns. So I'll say that's on my top. Like, it's going to be my top 1 book, my top 10 book for sure.
Good deal. And I got to steal a question from Tim Ferriss too, the great Tim Ferriss. What's your favorite book to give as a gift?
No surprise, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, or I like to give out Delivering Happiness, written by the late Tony Hsieh.
Brilliant. And I'm curious, Chris, have you always been a reader? Has that just been a part of your deal?
I'm ashamed to admit this, but no. I did what a lot of kids my age do in high school, which is I read to complete a task because I have to write a report or because it's a requirement to complete the class. All right. So I did that, and I would do what a lot of people do, I think, which is to take shortcuts, read what you can, write enough, and then never finish the book or read the Cliff Notes, literally that brand Cliff Notes, to be able to write my book report. It's not until much later, deep into my design career, that I start to investigate reading nonfiction books. Prior to that, I'm reading comic books. I'm reading design books, which nobody really reads. You just look at the images and you absorb the visual information. And then somewhere really late in my life, I would say in the last 10 years, I started reading, and the frequency in which I'm reading and the types of books that I'm reading are very different today than they were, say, 30 years ago.
Yeah, same. I mean, I really enjoyed books like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which now we're cool. Now we're cool for liking that stuff, right?
The nerds rule, man.
nerds rule the world. But
yeah.
I got to say, I've recently kind of caught the bug of reading, and it's been a real game changer for me. It's been a huge game changer. Was there a specific point in your journey? Like what got you into reading, Chris? Was there a catalyst, or you just say, I'm just going to start reading because everyone else is doing it?
Well, so here's the funny thing. I'm kind of an odd duck in which somebody says, Chris, you need to read this book. It sounds exactly like what you're talking about. So why would I read a book just to affirm what I already believe and have been saying? So I'd buy the book and I'd leave it on the shelf. And I'm a lazy reader. So I'm talking about, this is not that long ago. Okay, I'm running Blind. We're probably 10, 15 years into running the business. And I have creative directors, and I pick somebody smart and say, here, you need to read this book. And when you're done reading it, I want you to tell me what's in it. So the two books that I asked someone to read, one was Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, The Hidden Power of Persuasion. And the other book is The Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns, which I previously mentioned. I gave them to two different creative directors. The person who read Influence by Dr. Cialdini gave me an incredible summary. The 6 levers that bind us together as a society are things that people use with us and or against us when they want us to do something, like the law of reciprocity, the law of contrast. And he would tell me stories. So every time we went to lunch and we ate lunch together every working day, he would tell me another nugget. I'm like, oh, and this is an incredibly bright person. So I felt like I read the book, so much so that I quote from the book. I recommend people read the book. I've yet to read one page from the book. This is a great way to live life. The people you pay money to, have them read a book. It benefits them. They tell you what the high level things are, and you get the benefit of somebody reading it in a very personal way. So it's almost like an interactive audio book, which none exists today. The other person, also a super smart guy, read The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And he's like, it seems pretty common knowledge, but I don't think any of that is applicable to the industry in which we work in. And we work in advertising, and pitching is a requirement to even be considered. That's just how the industry devolved to. So I didn't read the book. But one person after the other kept saying to me, Chris, you need to read the book. You need to read the book. So I said, give me the book back. I want to read it now. And I went through it, and I was just saying to myself, why did I even trust this person to read this book for me? Because they actually discouraged me from reading the book. And once I read it, I'm like, I got to finish this thing. It's not a thick book. It's a manifesto. There are 12 proclamations. I tore through it probably in half a day. And it changed my life. I started quoting from it. I started teaching people principles of it, because the one thing that Blair Enns does is he is very succinct and economical with his words. And so the way he phrases things, it sounds like a scholar. So if you want to sound smarter, read the book and start to learn the language of how people speak about business and economics. Similar principles that I already knew and I was already practicing, but now I had the language to describe it. So I sound smarter. So I sound like I'm a consultant now. And so that starts me on this another trend. I was like, okay, what's the next book? I'm going to keep reading more books now. It feels good to read books.
It does. And I could just say personally, as I start to build out my podcast consulting firm, my podcast coaching group, and the podcast itself that we're listening to, the After Hours Entrepreneur, what I can do is I can read books, interpret it just like the people on your team, and then share it in my own way, share it with my own stories. And I feel like it brings a lot more weight to what I'm saying, to the advice I'm giving, right? Because it's not just me, it's the geniuses like Chris from Pocket Full of Dough, or Blair Enns from Win Without Pitching, you know?
You know what's really neat, and the benefit of it is, and I sometimes trip out, like if I had a superpower, one of the superpowers would be to have like telepathy or the ability to read people's minds, right? To understand what it is that you're thinking, or telekinesis, to be able to move objects throughout the room with my mind. Such a powerful thing. A fantasy I'm sure many kids have had, right? It's a power I want to have. When I'm reading a book, it is almost quite literally reading the person's mind. They put thoughts down over the course of time and space. Somewhere along the way, somebody like me can pick it up and quite literally read whatever it is that they've been thinking about. So it's the closest version of like some mental superpower. Is you can have the best mentors in the world. They could be living or dead. They don't even know that you exist, but you can tap into their brain. And the way that books are written, if they're written properly, is somebody has spent a considerable amount of time, thought, effort, and research into formulating just the right words in the exact precise sequence so that you can understand the material the best way possible. So when you and I are like trying to be smarter or to find ammunition to support arguments that we make or to counter other people's arguments, it's great to be able to pick up something that somebody might have spent 5 to 10 years, not literally writing, but collecting ideas for and then putting into paper. That's a pretty powerful thing.
Unbelievably powerful. Because one of the problems I think that we have in the society today, one of the problems that I have and have had is, I'll think, listen, I want to, let's say, start a podcast, for example. I'll watch 20 to 30 videos. Now I know how to start a podcast, right? But it's kind of like trying to build a castle with Legos and Lincoln Logs and some silly putty. And so to your point, with a book, you have one cohesive thought, one cohesive strategy from start to finish. I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Cleary, and that like a lot of this stuff sounds obvious, but I mean, just like example after example of small things that you can do on a daily basis. It's unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
Do you think that there was, when I want to talk about Blind for a moment here, which is a multi-million-dollar creative agency. Do you think that there was like one key moment that really blew, just put you on the map? Or was it those small, repeated procedures that gave you momentum?
That's a good question. I can answer yes to both those questions. So let me try. I'm very fortunate that my life and that my timeline, and at least the way it exists in my mind, it's clearly marked. There are high water marks. There's a benchmark or a baseline, so I can rewind the tape and say that's the moment that the game changed and know exactly when that was. Not in terms of like the specific date and time, but the event that everything was different afterwards. And that one moment was this. It was that we were working in kind of relative anonymity on a bunch of different accounts, but nothing really big, nothing that's going to be seen by a ton of people. And they're going to say, we've seen that. We know who you are now. And we had the opportunity to work on some Mitsubishi car commercials, these dealer spots, which was usually like a lot of sheet metal, as they would call it. So sexy car footage and not a lot of story. And at the end, they would say, you can buy this car for $199 down for 2.7% APR for 36 months. That's the stuff we got to work on. Pretty banal stuff. It's just type moving on the screen. But back then, there weren't a whole lot of people doing it and not a whole lot of people who knew how to even typeset well. And so this, as you know, there's a lot of type on the screen and you kind of have to manage all that, including the disclaimer at the bottom. And so we designed these things, we animated it. And what that positions us for was to work on the national work. So the dealer stuff is okay. It pays well, but it's not going to be anything anybody talks about. So the agency that we were working with at the time was called Deutsch LA. And Deutsch won the national account for Mitsubishi, hired this famous French director, Eric Ifrigan from Serial Dreamer, and we started to do the titles for the national campaign. And that moment is the moment when people would call us up looking for us because they've seen this work everywhere. So here's the lesson to learn from this, which is you can do really great work, but if not enough people see it, it's not going to be that lightning rod that draws a lot of people to you until you have this thing that is getting buzz, it's being seen by a lot of people. After we finished that national campaign, I called up a sales rep, and prior to this, every sales rep I called said, nah, you're too early for us. I don't know what to do with you. It's too much work to sell you. But when we were able to do that, I told them we just worked on that national campaign. They're like, we'll represent you. And then that was the thing that opened it up. So were there a bunch of things that happened before this? Absolutely. But that was the game changer. Like one thing led to another, and I could see the dominoes connected right there. Without a sales rep, it was going to be reliant on me to sell the company, and I'm not a good salesperson at that time.
So that's really fascinating to me. And I think that's a concept that most of us understand, right? We're going to create smaller pieces of work and we're going to leverage that as credibility, as testimonial, right? And one of the things that I hear a lot of, at least newer entrepreneurs, newer business people in the Futur Pro community talk about doing is giving away their work for free with the hope of leveraging that work to land a bigger job. Do you think it's a good idea to give away your work for free?
Yes, potentially. And this would seem antithetical to the things you normally hear me say, which is double your prices, charge more, you're not charging enough. Here's how you do value-based pricing. But what I've come to realize is anyone who is still between $0 to $100,000, and it's a broad number to be thrown out there like that, but generally speaking, people have yet to break the six-figure mark, are still trading their time for money, and haven't mastered the art of bringing on new business, closing new business, and bidding, and haven't developed the necessary processes. Now, in Los Angeles, $100,000 isn't a lot of money, especially if you live, say, in Northern California, where that's the poverty line at $100,000. You're still selling time for money. You could even do $200,000, still be selling time for money. So you haven't learned and mastered entrepreneurship the way I see it. You haven't mastered those principles yet. And so how are you going to be able to do this? It becomes a chicken and egg problem, Mark. So who's going to trust you to do something big, important, that's going to get you that national exposure and give you your first lucky break? This is one of those things where your skills currently exceed your ability to prove it. So you don't have anything in your portfolio, your body of work for any client or non-client at all that represent the kind of work you're capable of doing. And so you're asking kind of unrealistically for your client to take the leap of faith and to take the risk while paying you. And no right-minded client's going to do that. And so we've been talking a lot in the Futur Pro Group about making a no-brainer offer. And so if you're trying to sell your services and you're getting a lot of no's and it feels like you're running in place or maybe sinking in quicksand, then it's time to develop a new offer. And the offer is, I'm going to do something for you. It's going to be super valuable. I get to use this for my portfolio and I get to use your name. And if you're really over the moon with the results, I'd love to get a testimonial. It's going to cost you next to nothing. So we're trying to engineer a no-brainer offer so the other person can just say yes, so that we can actually have physical evidence and proof that our skills now do match something that we've produced. And with that, you could trade that up.
I like that. I like that answer because to your point, one of the things, and this is something that's hard for me, is continuously increasing your prices. And it's something I've heard you talk about a lot. But you know what? Sometimes it just works. And I also find that as I get more busy, as I bring on more clients, I kind of have to raise my prices. If I don't raise my prices, then there's just not enough time in the day. It's not worth it. Then it's cutting into family time or other things that are really important to me. I'm curious on your side, Chris, was there ever a time or an example of when you just threw out a crazy number and the client was just like, yep, done?
I try to make my life aligned around this principle to shock and delight myself by putting out numbers that I'm like, nobody's going to say yes to that. And they're like, okay, we'll make this happen. I'm like, great. First of all, that's awesome because it means the world sees you for the value that you are and the potential value that you bring to the table. And it's a wonderful feeling to be able to do that. But also, as you know, if people say yes too fast, it means that the price was under what they expected and they want to lock you in on that price before you get any wiser. And I remember many instances in my life, my career, either as a creative service person, as a brand strategist, or as a teacher, lecturer, or influencer, there have been many moments in my life where I'm like, wow, they do pay this amount. And that got me to believe that there is really no amount of money that you could ask for that someone somewhere would consider unreasonable. So what you have to do is you have to consistently level up. You have to upskill so that you're in a position where your skills actually exceed what the market perceives your value to be.
So here's a follow-up question along this line.
Okay.
Sometimes when you throw out a number, so like you're trying to design a business here, you're trying to build up a business. So, getting to that six-figure mark, your pricing is probably going to be a little over the place because we're still experimenting with prices, right?
Right.
So,
right.
For one client, I'm up here and then I get a few no's. I'm like, yeah, maybe I need to lower the price a little bit. And there's some back and forth. What are your thoughts on, hey, if I'm consistently getting a certain price, going back to all the no's, because let's be honest, we're being smart. We're keeping a catalog of all the leads, all the potential clients, all the emails. We're keeping a log of that, right? That's important. Once I've quoted someone a price, is it good or bad to follow up months later with a lower price and say, hey, let's do it for a lower price? What do you think about that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think in my career that spans over 2 decades that we've ever come back to a client to lower the price. I'll tell you why, then we can get into more nuanced conversations around this. Mostly because of my own belief that I want to win the job. I want to be their preferred pick and be the most expensive. So it's not within my internal dialogue that price is the reason why people don't buy. It's something else. Because I always want to be the most expensive bid and get the job. And we do have a track record of that being the case. When clients would later on say, you came in not just a little bit, but a lot more than everybody else. I'm like, great. I'm glad you made the right decision. That's how I think of it. Okay. And so let me tell you why I think this way. First of all, I just look at life as a video game or a game if you're not into video games, which is your objective is to see where the bar is, and we don't know where the bar is. And so what we want to do is just keep raising the bar. Figuratively, we want to increase the price, because when we increase the price, let's say you and I, we walk into a room and we're both pitching like logo services, right? You're going to design an identity system. I'm going to do the same thing. The scope is pretty clear. And you're going to ask for $15,000, which you might be thinking to yourself, this is ridiculous for this kind of work. I'm going to come in and ask for 45. knowing very well that you're going to come in much lower than me. I'm going to let the client know that I'm going to be your highest bid, maybe by a factor of 2 or more. And if there's any hesitation, they should just go with a cheaper option. So then I sit back and I let the clients do the thinking. And I could almost see the gears in their mind turning here. What is it that we're not getting with the $15,000 option? Why would Chris ask for $45,000? What is it that he knows that the other people do not know? And I'm pretty sure other clients have paid him this amount before, because it seemed like he was pretty confident this was the number and non-negotiable. And so what we realize is price tells a story. Everything you buy, everything that you do, the way that you understand the world is to tell yourself a story. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, you tell yourself a story like that person's a jerk. When in truth, it could be that they have someone that's elderly that needs to get to the hospital quick, right? And when good things happen to you, you're like, it must have been because I've done good things in my life. We just make up stories all the time because that's how the human operating system works. We're story creating and consuming creatures. And so when two prices are presented to the client, to the prospect, they're going to tell themselves a story. And you do this when you go to the dealership for a car. There's the 1 series, the 3, the 5, the 7 series. Each is priced to make you feel a certain way. So if it's a flagship model and it was priced like the 3, you're like, well, I don't want to be like everybody else who drives the 3 series. I want the 7 because fewer people can have it and people know what the price is. And so they know I'm a successful person. I'm doing well because I'm an expert at what it is that I do. So even if the other product was superior or on the same level, it doesn't give you the emotional story that you need, which is I've made it and not a lot of people have made it. So I want the clients to walk away and say, what kind of customer am I going to be? Who am I as a company? And where do we see our brand? I now want them to make the decision. We are the best. We want to hire the best. And we're not going to make any compromises. So when they give me that money, it's the right kind of relationship I want to build.
So I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, the value-based pricing. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons you're able to execute it so well is because you're really clear on your market. You have a very clear avatar, your customer journey, and it's niched down. I want to ask you a pretty important question. It's something that I think trips up a lot of people on that journey to 6 figures. But before I do that, you mentioned you see life as a video game. If life is a video game, which video game hero are you?
That's a good question. I play now, I guess in the last 10 years or so, there's only 2 types of games I play. First person shooters, which you're just an avatar, that it doesn't really matter who you are. You're on a mission, and most likely if it's a first person shooter, is to go kill somebody and not get killed. And so the character doesn't matter as much. But the other type of game I play is real time strategy, like Skyrim. And I haven't played that in a number of years, but then I'm the person who has the strengths of a human, who can cast some spells and sneak around like a thief. That's who I am. I'm trying to be that hybrid where I'm not trying to be all in on one skill set. I've got a diverse set of skills because I like to be able to like shout a word and have a dragon fall over.
I like
we
that.
We went deep on Nerdville there, everybody. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So watch your back. Chris is like lurking in the shadows.
I am. I'm learning how to pick locks, and it's so fun.
I like that. That's
on the video game.
That's good. That's good. Another, I'm getting way off topic here, but Pokemon, underrated, overrated?
Overrated.
Overrated.
Basic game mechanic, built-in structure to get kids to value cards more than they should. It's some strange power structure there. I was into it with my kids, and then we're out of it. But the game dynamics is pretty standard.
Yeah.
It is like a variation of rock, paper, scissors. One element is better than the other element, but no element is superior. And so it's a little bit of strategy, and there's a lot of luck, and it's rock, paper, scissors. That's all it is.
I hear Gary Vee talk a lot about the power of, NFTs and collectability and whatnot. And that's really, I think, what it is. Because my daughter's, she just started first grade and she's obsessed. Like, it's all Pokemon all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
maybe I have some Pokemon cards to give you.
She would be over the moon.
I don't even know where they are, but yeah, we have some nice cards.
She'd be over the moon. Although you can't trust her. She's like giving away cards to her 3-year-old brother, who proceeds to, not give them the respect they deserve. Right? All right.
Well, that happens. They're kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, listen, being a dad is tough. Being a parent, super tough. But allowing your kids to go on their own journey, I think is really crucial. And that's something that I definitely put a lot of value on. I'm getting way off topic here, but do you try to instill the entrepreneurship bug in your kids? Do you try to give them that, helping them set up lemonade stands and stuff?
I try to show them the benefits and the downside of being an entrepreneur. I try to live that as much as I can so that they can see it and see how it works and make the decision for themselves. My kids have never held a job in their life. They've never done door-to-door sales. They've not done a lemonade stand or tried to sell anything. I encourage them, but they don't really want to do it. That's not how they want to move about the world. To date, my oldest boy, who's in college now, he's 18, he's made no money in his life ever, except for when he wins prizes for writing competitions, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So he's using his intellect to make money, and it's through academia, and he's very academically oriented. My youngest has made more money as a 16-year-old than I probably have made till I was past 22 years old. So he's created art and he does commissioned work, and he has created his own NFT and sold out on the first day. He's doing things I don't even fully understand myself. So there's something in there about him leveraging his artistic skill and meeting it at the intersection of technology and new innovation. I think there's opportunity for him there.
Yeah, I'll say that. The audience tends to tune out when I go too deep into NFTs, but I'll say that's definitely a good way to go. Congratulations, man. That's an underrated skill to raise great kids. So I want to get back on topic. I got a little bit off topic. We were talking Pokemon stuff. So particularly in the Futur Pro Group, we've been talking a lot about developing your avatar, developing the customer journey, so on and so forth. I find both personally and with a lot of people that I work with trying to get to that 6-figure mark, that it is hard to niche down. We're kind of in this role where you want to give me money? Sure. You want to give me money? Sure. I'll take it. Everyone,
right.
It's like Oprah, except the opposite. Give me your money instead of you get it money. So do you think that starting off, it's better to start broad and niche down, or you think it's better to stay super niched and focused on your avatar and your client?
Great question. Now, this isn't really based on chronology of how long you've been on Earth, right? There's no set timeline that works for everybody. There's a period in time when you're going to reap the most benefits by trying lots of things and exploring different markets and skill sets, and I think that's a good thing. We'll call it this phase one, and Blair Enns talks about this all the time. So phase one, you're saying yes to everything because you still don't know what it is you love and like and the types of clients, and so you need to explore. We'll kind of look at this like food. Before you decide what kinds of food are going to be your favorite, you should try lots of foods so you have a very broad palette and you're making a very informed decision and not just inheriting the food choices that your parents made. That makes a lot of sense. At some point in your life and your career, you're going to have to enter into phase two where you do the exact opposite, where everything that you use to get you here is now going to work against you. So the second phase marks you saying no to almost everything. And when you say no to almost everything, it forces you to be very selective as to what you say yes to and who you wind up doing this work for. This is really critical. And we know this, like people who are exposed to the same problem repeatedly, they're able to spot patterns, they develop efficiencies, they might even invent frameworks or models that other people wind up referring to. So now you know you're commanding and building authority, and authorities in any space wind up getting the best opportunities, wind up making the most amount of money, having the least amount of competition, and are most likely to be in the driver's seat when it comes to a client engagement. And so we have to go through those two phases. How fast you get through one phase or the other really is up to you and your preference, but I think the faster you can get to phase two, you have greater success. So let's put this in perspective. I don't have my tax returns to validate some of this information, but I'm almost 100% certain by the time I was a year and a half into my business as a 22-year-old, I've already made 6 figures. So I put that out there because I think 6 or 7 months into my business, I had made the decision that despite having spent 4 years pursuing a career in graphic design and packaging and entertainment design, I decided I'm going to just pursue motion design. Now, people who are listening to this, like motion design is a big and broad subject to talk about. Back then, it wasn't as big as it is today, but I had almost no competition. So even saying I'm a motion designer meant I was competing with probably 20 firms in the world. And so I was already niched down at that point, right? Now, if you say I'm a motion designer, you're competing probably with tens of thousands of people, hundreds of companies. So that's not good enough now to say I'm a motion designer, because that's saying I'm like, it's like akin to saying I'm a graphic designer. So we made that decision because I said, I cannot be a good web designer. I can't draw logos and build identity systems and do motion design equally well. So I'm going to pick the one that I could see myself writing for the next 5 to 10 years. That decision took me over 20 years to find its termination. But that at that point, I made that decision. I got the clarity and focus, and the business started to grow.
For me, when you're blessed enough that you can start saying no, to your point, that to me is when you start to see the real opportunities, because all that time that you're spending saying yes and kind of fuddling around, it's time that could be better spent focusing on what you do best with who you do best, and so on and so forth.
Let me ask you a question, Mark. What is your ability and power to say no right now?
Again, and I mentioned this before we got into the call here, that I left my day job about 2 months ago. I was in an insurance career.
Still pretty fresh then.
Pretty fresh.
2 months.
Yeah, I started my business about 4.5 years ago. I started experimenting with different things. And I'll tell you, I was saying yes to anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
And I was able to, I don't want to say quickly, but I was able to find out the types of jobs that weren't a good fit, the type of client that wasn't a good fit. And as I was able to identify that, I was able to more easily say, you're not a fit for me. I don't do this, but guess what? I know a guy, I know a girl. Let me shift you there. And so I would say, like, listen, money's not falling from the sky right now, but for me, I'm blessed enough that I have enough opportunities that I'm not afraid to say no. If it's not a fit, I'm either going to say no, or to our point before, I'm going to give an outlandish number. And if they say yes, okay, we'll make it happen.
Right.
I think you made this point before too. If you throw out an outlandish number and it's not your core competency, you just subcontract it out.
That's right. I direct it. I facilitate the work being done. I connect a need with a supply. You need something, I know who can do it, and I'm good with that. But I do want to say this thing that for many of us who are growing up in a middle class family, who have two parents, a dual income household, there's a long period of time in which we're able to say no to everything. And then somewhere along the way, we commit ourselves to spend more money than what we have. We outlive our means. And so now we have to say yes to a whole bunch of different things. But when I was 15, I was desperate to get a job. Desperate. So I waited to get my worker's permit, and I went to work because I wanted to earn enough money to buy my own things. My parents weren't expecting me to pay rent or anything. It was just about having extra pocket money so I can go out and buy a Walkman or a new CD or an album or something like that, right? First job I got, I was working as a stock boy in a fabric warehouse. I didn't like the job, so I quit that job. I went in and I started working at Arby's dropping fries. I didn't like that job. I quit that job. I didn't last at any of these jobs for very long. I was saying no a lot, even at 15 years old, because I thought, you know what? At least if I'm going to work for minimum wage, I could just work at a cool company like Arby's, fast food. But it was super gross. My face was filled with hot, greasy oil every single day. And as a teenager, I don't need any extra help in that department generating more oil for my face. And so I'm like, no. And then I went to work for my girlfriend's parents, who owned a chain of grocery stores. And I was like, this is cool. At least I get to help their family. But I hated that job. I just kept saying no because all of it was doing manual, unskilled labor. And I thought to myself, I've got more in life to give than just this. And then finally, the right job comes along because I created space to be able to say yes. And people need to recognize this part, where I got a job working as a production artist at a silk screening company. Ooh, this was really cool. Because first, they paid me at that time, I think almost 6 times as much as when I was doing unskilled labor. It was the first time I got to do something creative and get paid for it. Although I was inking someone else's drawings, I was learning new skills. So I was leveling up. This was going to be a life skill. And I got to be around creative people doing really interesting things. That was the closest thing I get to fashion, which I was really into. Like they're printing things on t-shirts. This is really cool to me. And so this is the only job that I said yes to consistently before I knew I needed to do something else and take this to the next level. And so even throughout my college career, when certain students would ask me to help them and they didn't want to pay me enough money, I would just say no. Like, no, I'd rather just sit here and watch the clouds go by because it's really not getting me out of bed. And so I have a pattern of saying no. I do want to admit that I'm privileged enough to be able to be raised in a dual income middle class family that I could afford to say no. Not everybody's like that. Some people don't have parents. Some people only have a single parent. Some people are living below the poverty line. Of course, those are different circumstances. But there's a vast majority of people who are going to listen to this and say, well, I've had all those same privileges in life. Why haven't I said no enough? And I don't know what the answer is, but for you to dig inward and find what that answer is and start to practice saying no more often.
I mean, I think for years I really struggled to do that, Chris. I figured, oh, they hired me. I said yes to this job. I need to see it out. Everyone's going to think I'm a failure. I can't quit now. But in retrospect, it's funny how hindsight is 20/20. Because I look back and be like, what the heck was I thinking? I delivered pizzas for that long? What the heck was I doing? But listen, we can't go back in time, right? And so I love, I love that idea of what can I do to make change now, and just saying no. I mean, I think that was originally invented by the Reagans to keep kids off drugs.
Nancy Reagan, just say no.
But it's also valuable in keeping yourself out of a bad job that's not going to help propel your life forward. Yeah,
not just that. It's about understanding what your boundaries are and honoring your own agreements. So if you say, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go out with that person. I'm not going to deal with this kind of abuse in a personal relationship or a professional relationship. It's just about honoring your own boundaries. That's when you say no. You say no out loud, not just internally. You don't just walk away with resentment like, oh, I should have never done that. I hate you, client. Well, you're responsible because you said yes. Don't say yes then.
Yeah.
Don't go picking up somebody at the airport and just being angry at them the whole time. Just say no. Don't let someone crash at your pad just because you're uncomfortable telling them no, and then you resent them for it. You have to look at yourself and say, why did I not exercise my right to say no? Why do I feel so compelled to people please that I'm going to subjugate my own happiness and joy? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's very, very well said. I really, the idea of kind of like owning up to your decisions is I think really important to me. Some things are not some things are not within our control, but being able to say no absolutely is. And maybe not just saying like, no, go take a hike, but saying like, no, not for me. Here's my buddy who can manage the fry panel,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your education that you do with the Future. Congratulations, 2 million subscribers on YouTube, by the way.
Thank you.
Super and well-deserved. What was the moment where you recognized that you needed to help teach? You needed to build out an educational platform?
Oh, okay. That's a two-parter. I've always thought of myself as a teacher since being in college and even going to community college, because for whatever reason, when it came to the language of design, I spoke it natively, even though no one taught me. And so when the teachers would give us assignments, I seemed to do better than most of my classmates, not all, obviously. And the ones who could see me progressing much faster than the other students, they would ask me for help. And it's like, I'm helping you. This is cool. I felt good. And I have to say, when you help other people, there is a hit to your ego in a very positive way. It builds you up. Like, wow, I know something that somebody didn't know, and I could help people. It puts you in a superior position, and it feels really good. So I finished school, and I really wanted to be a teacher, but I made a promise to myself because I would be very critical of students who had just graduated quite literally, and the school went back and hired them to teach a class again. I thought, this is terrible. I think of myself pretty highly. I think I'm an excellent student. But I think no matter how good of a student I am, the best I could hope for is to be, say, 50% of what my professors were. Like, at the top student, the best I could be is a 50% clone of my teacher. So if I go back, what chance does someone who's going to learn under me have? They're going to have 50% of 50%, assuming that I was a great student and they're a great student. Anybody else is not a great student, it's going to have a much lower number. So I said, I'm going to go and accomplish something with my life before I come back. And I put roughly 5 years on the board, like saying, I'm not going to go back. 5 years is an arbitrary amount of time, but it feels like I need to go live life for 5 years. In those 5 years, I built up my company, hired people, won gigantic jobs, lost gigantic jobs, and have created a little bit of a name for myself within the industry. And it just so happened that my friend, Michelle Doherty, was teaching a class, and she said, I can't teach this class. I have too many conflicts. Do you want to take it over? The door opened. I walked right in it, and that door lasted for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
I taught at a private art school for 15 years before I even recorded my first video or even thought about recording anything on YouTube. Okay, so that's the first part of your answer. When did I know I wanted to teach? Very, very early. Now, when did I know that I needed to build out an educational platform? Well, see, we use pretty much off-the-shelf learning content management systems. Is it LMS? Learning management systems, not content, LMS. And there's plenty of them that are out there. None of them are perfect. Perfect doesn't exist unless you try to build it yourself. So the platform is there. I'm just utilizing and leveraging open source platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, to be able to create an audience community, to build awareness, and to develop authority. And then some of those people decide, you know what, we want to go on this adventure with you a little deeper. What else do you have? You have a book, you have a course, you have a coaching community. Some of them decide this is right for me, and then they wind up joining. So I didn't necessarily create the platforms. I just use what's available, coupled with my experience and tapping into a greater and growing demand for online education for those autodidacts out there who don't want to go the traditional route and be given a syllabus and a whole thing where they have to show up and they're graded. They want to learn on their own terms. And so we're trying to meet them where they're at.
Well, and I think honestly, Chris, I think it's probably one of the most important things that isn't really talked about. I'm 39. Growing up, it was graduate high school, get good grades, do sports, community service, go to college. And, I don't know, bro, but basically nothing that I learned in college had a direct translation to my working life.
Right.
However, I started a podcast agency. I didn't have any experience in broadcasting. I didn't have any experience in building out a services-based industry, business like this. Or even my coaching platform either. I didn't have any experience with that. It seems like a disservice to our youth to teach children how to pass tests, rather than the way that your approach goes about teaching is very hands-on. I can't remember, but you have a package which gives you, here's the taxes, here are the contracts. Here's your sales. It's like an entire package. It's like $1,000 or something. I can't remember. But it's kind of like, learn hands-on while you're taking action at the same time. I don't mean to come here and just sell everyone on your course or anything, necessarily, but I took years and years and years of Spanish. I didn't learn anything. I could not speak any Spanish. 2 months in a kitchen, I was speaking Spanish, baby. Yo comprendo. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, they make fun of me a little bit, but
Right. If I knew more Spanish, I'd jump in, but I'm not going to.
That's fair. That's fair. But I think it's completely underrated. I'm kind of curious, where do you see the future of education going? Do you see more content creators like yourself, releasing more content? Where's the future of communication going?
Okay. You're opening up a can of worms, and I'm happy to take a spoonful here. The educational model that we have here in the United States is a very efficient one for banks to make money. Let me just unpack that a little bit, because what did he just say? I believe many schools are the front of house for loaning institutions, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's one of these very rare industries or businesses where they will give just about anybody a low interest loan that it has deferred payment terms, right? The government and schools are kind of, for the greater good under that kind of guise, going to give you, based on really no credit history, a loan so that you can buy a product that theoretically will allow you to contribute to society. And it's the only kind of debt that you can get that's not forgivable ever. Like you can file for bankruptcy and get bankruptcy protection to ruin your credit, but at least you can get creditors off your back and start over. So when you go out there and you go to a private school, whatever kind of school, you're going to wind up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars just in tuition alone. Tuition for my son's school right now is $30,000 a semester. That's what my wife and I are committed to right now. That's a lot of freaking money. I'm not sure what kind of job my son's going to be able to get with a bachelor's degree in writing that's ever going to be able to pay that down. So I want to acknowledge that part first. So I believe there are other models that exist outside of this educational industrial complex, if that's such a term, that could work really well. If we go back to ancient times, prior to formal education systems being built by the English Empire, we have apprenticeships. And if you take, like, say, if you want to be a blacksmith, there was a very specific way that you became a blacksmith. Your parents would pay a blacksmith money to have them take you on as an apprentice. And you would learn the craft from this person. And when you learned enough skill, the blacksmith would send you on your way saying, you're not a blacksmith yet, you're a journeyman, and you're going to go to the next blacksmith, and you're going to help that blacksmith out. And so that you're going to acquire skills from a couple different masters before you can hang up your shingle and join a trade and say, you know what, I'm a blacksmith now. This model works well for ancient times because there weren't that many people that wanted to learn things or had the means to. So this works perfectly. But this model can still work today with masterminds, small group coaching, and also, I guess we call them internships now. We don't use, or mentorships. We don't call them apprenticeships so much anymore. And then we can go the other side, which is if schools are essentially regurgitating information, which is what they're doing, is there a more cost-effective model that someone can get the information without paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire this information? And so I think there's opportunity outside of this main sphere of formal education, mentorships, apprenticeships, and also taking the information and distilling it and giving it away at a relatively low cost that could be done at scale. Traditional schools require you to be there in person. So that already creates natural boundaries and barriers for people, right? So if I'm from another country and my parents can't afford to send me to school in America, it's not even a consideration anymore. If they can't afford the tuition fees. I'll give you an example right now. One of my cousins, I have many cousins, extremely bright guy, was given a full scholarship to go to Caltech. This is a prestigious thing, full scholarship. And his parents decided not to send him because the cost of living and being able to show up and look like everybody else was far beyond what they could grasp. So they elected not to send him to Caltech. What a disappointment, because the money in their socioeconomic standing within America was so low that they could not subject their own child to that kind of feeling like they're an outsider. So if we just change the educational model to be online and figure out how to distribute that, that means that I no longer have to travel somewhere. I don't have to wear the uniform. I don't have to look the part. I could just consume the information. So we're opening it up to a lot more people. And because it's done at scale, infinitely scalable, it's not impacted by 30 students taking the course or 3 million students taking the course, then the price can be much lower and much more equitable given the amount of information that's being transferred from one person to the next.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think you just hit the nail on the head of the idea of apprenticeships too. I think is completely undervalued right now. It's kind of funny. It was a big deal back in the feudal times, but if you could go to a graphic design company and say, oh yeah, I did an internship at the Future or at Blind for 6 months to a year. To me, that's hands-on. That's more valuable than book knowledge, right, in my book. And I think that's a big testament to the creator economy that we're in right now, the scale of the internet. So that's really, really well said. I'm glad we went there, Chris, because I think that's an important conversation we need to have. I definitely believe that if you want to learn something, you can learn it. The piece of paper is not as relevant, Yeah. Despite that, I have a couple pieces of paper here. This is a community college here, so I got no shame in my game.
Yeah.
It is what it is. All right, Chris. So before I let you go here, I got to get into the rapid fire section. So buckle up, get the parachute ready. We are locked and loaded, ready to rock. And before I let you go, Chris, where's the best place for someone to reach out to you?
You can find me on almost every social network that's out there at the Chris Doe. Last name is Doe. That's D-O. And you can also go to thefuture.com, Futur.com. No E.
Bang. And I'll make it easy. I'm going to put links right there. Right. You see right down there in the comments?
Super easy.
There'll be links there.
It's called user experience design right there.
Oh, I learned from the best. Just click the link. Click the link. Guess what? It might even be bolded. Depending on where you're at, it might even be bolded.
Nice.
I get crazy with it. All right. Cool. Chris, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
Scariest movie? The Ring.
That's up there.
Yeah.
If you could be any animal.
And I was bothered by that movie, by the way.
You was bothered?
I was slightly traumatized by the movie. I'm like, oh, don't watch the video. You know, it made you scared to watch videos.
Yeah. Maybe it was some subliminal messaging to stop us from watching TV so much. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
It didn't work, but thanks. Thanks, Hollywood. Thanks for trying.
Did for about a week.
There you go. If you could be any animal, what would you be?
Shoot. Maybe an eagle. Do you just look at claws on eagles? They're incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And what they can pick up with those claws, incredible. The strength, the body mass, love it.
They can fly.
They look cool too.
They darn right they look cool.
Yeah.
Talons, beaks. Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. It's a good answer. Not a common answer, but a great answer. I like it. If you had the chance to go to Mars, would you go?
Yes.
Snap call.
Yeah. The perspective that you would get. You know, I think humanity changed when we saw images from the moon being sent back about what the Earth looked like. To realize we're just this blue speck in the universe. It's pretty powerful.
What would you order is your final meal on death row?
Kobe beef. Probably a side of Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts?
I love Brussels sprouts.
Props to you.
And probably something with a little acid and then something with a little heat. Maybe grilled shishito peppers, bring a little Japanese influence in there. And I don't know what else would be there, but that feels pretty good to me.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm getting hungry already.
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere on Earth, where would you live?
I'm living there right now. Southern California.
Damn, that's the right answer. That's the right answer right there. If you could sit next to anyone on an airplane, who would you want to sit next to?
Steve Jobs. I want to know what he thinks. I want to know what he can admit to himself, and if he's totally delusional, if he's a total egocentric egomaniac, or is he the super cool person just completely misunderstood?
Well, he wears flip-flops, so as a Floridian, he's good in my boat. He's good in my boat.
Is that right?
Yeah. Wear flip-flops. Can we just change
I
the
know he didn't like to
professional-
shower a lot either, so that's a little funky.
He did like to shower a lot?
There was a whole period in his life where he didn't shower and people were like, you smell really bad right now.
Well, I mean, that's 10 minutes out of your day. So, if you're min-maxing, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe.
Final question here for you, Chris. If you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
I tell myself, start creating content now. You're not going to understand it. It's going to make you feel really weird, but just keep at it because it's going to be the biggest gift to you.
Boom. Chris said it. I agree with it. Chris, thank you, brother.
My pleasure, Mark.
Boom. There you have it. Chris Doe coming in, dropping bombs and really, really bringing the heat. I got to say that concept of being able to say no, just saying no is, so important. And regardless of where you're at in your journey right now, if you can get to that point where you have the freedom to say no, it is completely liberating. And listen, lots of takeaways, I'm still kind of processing all of the knowledge, as I hope that you are. And while you're doing that, go take action. You've listened, you've learned. Now it's up to you to take the action. Just like we talked about, the best way to educate yourself is by taking the action. and then come back. We've got a huge catalog of great episodes on here. Everyone from Pat Flynn, Jasmine Starr, Evan Carmichael, Roberto Blake, Sean Cannell. The list goes on. David Meltzer. I mean, listen, the list goes on and on. It's so big, I can't even go into all the different names. But the After Hours Entrepreneur is your guide to building your first six-figure year of your business. Let's go get it. Go take action. Thanks for subscribing. I'll catch you here next time on the show. Peace.